Hi, my name's Mariko, and I have a religious studies midterm in 3 days' time. That means I'm going to make a video about everything that I've learned so far in the Images of the Divine Feminine course taught by Dr. Janet Ross. So this is part the first. The first thing that we want to start off with is gender and what we mean by gender. Gender is a social construct. It's not an innate thing that people tend to think it is. Gender is made up of a bunch of different parts, how we identify, how we present ourselves. As we've learned in the course, gender is partly our bodies and our physical or biological selves. Gender is also our identification and what's in our heads, what we feel like and what we know and what we believe and how we see the world. Next is our sexuality. Sexuality is who we're attracted to or who we want to engage in romantic and sexual relationships with. Lastly is presentation, how we dress and how we exhibit our gender on our bodies and interact with other people in a gendered way. These are 4 distinctly separate parts. What your body is has no bearing on what's in your brain, and what's in your brain has no bearing on what you feel in your heart and who you're attracted to. Sexuality and gender identity are not the same thing. Sex, like gender, is also a social construct, and before people start attacking me and saying that that sounds ridiculous, it's true. There's no more male and female as there is no more man or woman. There's plenty of places and spaces in between and outside of those categories. Sex, as we've often been taught, is not actually just XX and XY chromosomes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can just search up Google and there'll probably be some good articles and stuff on there. But gender is part of a larger system. It's part of gendered structures and gender socialization. That can be chopped up to what is considered the cult of normalcy. The cult of normalcy prescribes what is normal, what is acceptable, and what is good. The cult of normalcy dictates our behavior and, by socialization, reinforces those ideas. What's considered the default or normal is often the white, male, and straight part of society. Also has lots to do with our ability and also our social status. The gender structure and gender hierarchy defines how we even interact with the world around us. This structure dictates who is working where, such as the private or the public spheres, who is responsible for child work, who is supposed to be outside of the home and earning money. Not only does gender divide the workforce, but it also divides power. Who has authority or who has power is often dictated by gender. When we see women in positions of power, often we think of her as a bitch, or she must be super bossy, or be like a man in order to be able to get that role. These gender expectations and roles also dictate our emotional lives, what we're allowed to feel and allowed to reflect on. Men aren't allowed to cry, but women are expected to be emotional and cry all the time. Our gender also organizes our social behavior, how we act around each other or how we are allowed to act, particularly around people of the opposite gender. The thing is, if gender was an innate thing, if masculinity and femininity and maleness and femaleness were actually things that were biological, they wouldn't change over time and they wouldn't vary from culture to culture. But we see that is definitely the case. Cultural values shape and mold what's the ideal version of a man and what's the ideal version of a woman. Gender is a basic way in which we divide up the world. Whenever we look at a person, we seek to categorize them into either category of male or female, and if we can't do that, we often become very uncomfortable. This is problematic, but it's the way that we're taught to arrange our world and understand the world around us. Because this is a strict binary, we're apt to judge people on this more quickly than, say, religious affiliation, where there is a bit of a leeway where you can supposedly understand if somebody isn't the same religion as you, or there's multiple religions that you can belong to. For gender, it's either male or female, and if you're not either of those things, then you're deemed as unacceptable or wrong. I think a lot of this can be chalked up to the fact that we think that people have the right to express their religion how they want to, but yet we don't think that people have the right to express their gender however they want to. Although our current societal system and the gender hierarchy puts men in positions of power over women, this apparently was not always the case. Matriarchal societies did exist where equality was well known and women were revered for their childbearing properties. So while a lot of times people tend to idealize the idea of a matriarchy and women's equality, A lot of this actually stems from problematic places where women's bodies are essentialized into being childbearing machines. We shouldn't value women on their ability to pop out babies, but rather value them as intelligent, capable human beings on their own. There's a myth of this matriarchal prehistory where everything was all well and good, but it's actually a bit of a sexist notion that there's this biological essentialism that reduces women to their reproductive organs. A lot of people think that, oh, well, we had women in control once, that means that women should be in control again. This is problematic because just because something happened once doesn't mean it should happen again. Gender is the way that we organize our society, but gender only depends on us actually actively participating in that system. By doing gender, as Judith Butler puts it, we affirm and we confirm all of those ideas and ideologies that come along with gendered practices. If we were to stop doing these things, then the status quo wouldn't exist anymore and the entire system would fall apart. So that concludes part 1 of Gender and Matriarchal Prehistory for the review of images of the Divine Feminine. If you are interested in hearing more about the image of the Divine Feminine, you can join me back here whenever the next video is up. Presumably sometime soon, because the midterm's on Tuesday. So good luck.